Hi everybody, it's Kim from Patriot Garden, and today we're going to be making some pesto with some basil and onion tops that I have from the garden. Both of these recipes are going to be an amazing burst of summer in the middle of winter. Hey, before we get started, don't forget to follow Patriot Garden on Instagram and on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if these videos are helpful for you. Pesto is an oil-based sauce. You don't cook it to begin with, although we are going to blanch our onion tops before we get started today. Usually a pesto is made with some type of green, some type of seasoning. Today we're going to be using some salt and some pepper. We're also going to be using some Parmesan cheese. And we're also going to get some seasoning, flavor, and a little bit of crunch and extra protein from nuts. We're going to be using walnuts with our onion tops today, and we're going to be using pine nuts with our basil, otherwise known as pignoli nuts, to give that basil pesto a little bit of a traditional Italian flair. Everything I'm putting by during the month of August, I'm documenting on my Instagram page as part of the Every Bit Counts challenge to see if you can put something away in your house, either in your pantry as a canned good or a frozen good, or save some seeds. I am actually a little bit behind, and this morning I did some pickles and some salsas, and I'm also saving more seeds to try to catch up. School is starting. Some of you may know that I'm a teacher and I'm trying to get my classroom ready. The kids are coming next week, so I've had less time during the day to do this stuff, and I really need to catch up. So I'm going to actually count this as 2 days, one day with the basil pesto and one day with the onion top pesto. I'm going to be using some frozen basil and frozen onion tops. I've been collecting them as I harvest them. The basil I'm harvesting just to prune my plants so that they'll grow back bushier and I'll get more basil. The onion tops, I am pruning off my onions so that the energy of the plant goes to making a nice big onion bulb. So I've been saving them in the freezer. Now I'm going to be making big batches of this so I can freeze multiple batches of the pesto when I'm done. But if you are saving fresh things and you just want to make small batches, or batches you're going to eat right then and there and eat fresh, which is probably even more amazing, then you'll want to save your fresh produce in something that's going to keep them really crisp and as if they just came off the plant. I use these Peak bags, which are awesome at putting in the refrigerator, loading it up with stuff. Even if you're getting 1 or 2 peppers a day or a handful of leaves a day, it'll keep that stuff fresh for a few days while you gather up enough supply to make a recipe. So I'll put a link to these Peak bags down below, and it'll be in my Amazon affiliate store. I've got some water boiling on the stove because, as I said, we're going to have to blanch the onion tops. We do not need to blanch the basil. So I'm going to get the basil out of these bags and get it kind of crumpled up so I can fit it in my food processor. Now the first thing I'm going to do is pack this food processor with some basil and get it ground up to almost a paste. Now this basil is going to have a lot of ice, which is obviously going to turn to water, which is going to be okay because you're going to want to get it a little liquefied. When you go to make pasta with your pesto, and I found especially when pesto is frozen, it gets a little bit thicker. So a way to turn that more into a sauce is to actually just add some of your pasta water. So when I open up my pesto and I get it ready to serve, I will put it in a bowl and I will add a little bit of that pasta water and just create more of a sauce before I add it to my pasta. I'm going to be using my puree setting, and I'm going to grind this up to a paste. Now you're going to notice that I don't do any measuring when I make pesto. I kind of just eyeball everything. If you're a measuring person, I'm sure you can find a recipe, but really this is such a foolproof thing to do that you can really just learn what you like and taste, and after a while you'll figure it out. And one thing I forgot is we are going to be using fresh garlic. I forgot to put that in my list of things that we'll be using. So while this is turning into a liquid with some of the oil, I'm going to be chopping up some garlic. using some really big elephant garlic that I happened to find at the farm. You can use any garlic that you like, and since I like a lot of garlic, I'm going to use almost this entire clove, possibly the entire clove, in this one batch in my food processor. You know, this is going to be something that you're going to want to develop a recipe for. You're going to want to know what flavors you like together. For instance, when I was harvesting my garlic scapes this year, I decided to make some pesto with garlic scapes. And I discovered that I really liked the flavor of pistachios with those garlic scapes, and that pesto was amazing. I have about 3 more servings left in the freezer. All right, so we've got our garlic in here. I'm going to drizzle some oil in the top. I'm going to get that to a nice liquidy consistency, and then I'm going to season it with salt and pepper and a little bit of Parmesan cheese. And then I'm going to add my pinoli nuts. Now, if I had to guess, I think I just put about maybe a quarter of a cup, maybe not even, of oil. I'm going to end up putting more in here because oil is not only just for the flavor, it's for the consistency. You want the consistency of your pesto to be really smooth. You don't want it to be like a paste because it is going to thicken up when you freeze it. I'm just going to scrape down this bowl a little to make sure that everything gets incorporated, and possibly add some more oil. The problem with using frozen basil, of course, is that when you add your oil, it gets a little coagulated, but it won't last that long. It'll warm up. I feel like Julia Child, you know? Except I'm not drinking the olive oil straight from the bottle. Okay, I'm going to scrape this down one more time. I'm going to season it while the top is off, and then we're going to start adding our nuts. I don't have patience for the holes in the salt shaker. So I'm just eyeballing that. I think that was about a teaspoon of salt. And probably less of pepper, maybe a half a teaspoon of pepper. Okay, these are pine nuts. I really love pine nuts. I actually like them in cookies as much as I like them in pesto. I'm going to assume that I'm going to do 4 batches of this basil pesto. So I'm going to use about half of this container of nuts. Again, I'm not really measuring. I'm guessing this is probably a half a cup of nuts, so maybe a quarter cup of pine nuts, but you're going to taste yours and decide whether you want more or less nuts, more or less salt. That's going to be up to you. Let's get those incorporated. Right, I don't know if you can see, but it's starting to get this beautiful green color, and it's actually starting to look more like a liquid. And you can see I'm being very liberal with my olive oil, which is not a problem for me. Now we're going to scrape down again. We want to keep scraping down. And then the last thing we're going to add to this recipe is some Parmesan cheese. Now, I'm not using this as a measuring thing. I'm just using this as a way to get the cheese in here and try to control it a little. This is a 1/4 cup measure, And so we'll start with that, and then I'm going to give it a little smell and a little test. Okay, so let's smell and give it a taste test and see what we think. Now I want to make sure that I smell everything that I put in there. I want to make sure that I smell the pine nuts, that I smell the garlic, and that I smell the cheese. And then of course the basil. Oh my God, this is like green gold. Really, really good. I don't think I'm going to add anything to this. I might give it one more shot of olive oil, and then I'll show you a trick for putting it in a plastic bag. Okay, I want you to take a look at the consistency of this. It's got that bright green color, which is amazing, and it also is very liquidy. I think you can see that, all right? So it is going to get a little thicker when it gets frozen, but I'm thinking that this is going to go into 2 separate plastic bags. I'll have 2 evenings of a pasta with basil pesto. Okay, now a quick, sometimes I get so sloppy. A quick trick for putting things like this in a plastic bag that could really make it yucky on the outside is to simply fold down the top as like a little cuff, make a little bowl out of it, and then you can easily fill that. Now I think I'm going to split this between 2 bags so that I have 2 meals worth of pesto from this one batch. All I'm going to do is flip over my cuff. I leave this open just a little bit on the side and then push the pesto down so it's a single layer. It helps it to defrost faster if you freeze it in a single layer. And then when you think you've pumped all the air out, just close that seal and you have a vacuum-packed serving of basil pesto. I'm going to keep going through this, and I'll turn the camera back on when we're ready to do onion top pesto. All right, so we're done with the basil pesto. I ended up with 8 quart bags. That's about 8 servings. I found this quart bag with about a cup of the pasta water will cover a good pound of homemade pasta or dried pasta. And of course you can use this on fish, you can use this on chicken, you can use this on anything. You could even use it as a burger topping with a little bit of mozzarella cheese for a nice change of pace. And I also took a break with probably the most amazing drink I have ever made. And I got this from Kevin at Living Traditions Homestead. He made this. He made it as a limeade. I made mine as a lemonade with overgrown cucumbers. You know those cucumbers that you didn't see the first, second, or third time you harvested, and they're huge and yellow, and there's really nothing you can do other than save the seeds from them. Pureeing them, straining them, and making a lemonade or a limeade is probably one of the most refreshing drinks that I have ever had on a hot summer day. So kudos to Kevin from Living Traditions Homestead. This stuff is amazing. Okay, so now with our onion tops, we actually have to blanch these. So I've got a pot of water on the stove. I've got, I don't know, I'm going to guess maybe a ½ pound of onion tops here. And remember, these are frozen, so there's some water frozen in there, probably a little bit less than that. And I'm going to blanch them, and I'm going to get the water out of them, and then we're going to get ready to puree them. This time we're going to be using some walnuts. I don't want you to think these are long recipes by looking at the window behind me. I know it was daylight when I started, but I had to go outside and do the chicken close-up chores. So now I'm back at it. I have just about wilted the onion tops in boiling water, just to blanch them, stop the enzymes, and still make sure that they are bright green before I put them in here. I got a little extra water in here that I'll drain before I put them in here. Now remember, I started with frozen onion tops, so I only let them blanch for about 1.5 minutes. If you have fresh onion tops, you might want them to blanch for about 2 minutes. Also, I'm going to put the water that I blanched these in into some ball jars and freeze because it's a great vegetable broth. Here's what we're going to add, and we're going to put it all into the bowl at the same time. I'm going to put my onion tops. I'm just going to dump out some of the water. And I'm guessing this is maybe about 1.5 cups of onion tops after having been blanched. And I chopped up, I'm going to say about a couple of handfuls of parsley from the garden. And then I'm going to put in a nice generous amount of walnuts. I'm probably going to put in about half of this container. This is probably about 1 cup. So figure 1/2 cup of walnuts. And then I'm going to put in some salt, maybe about a teaspoon of salt. Okay, we're going to add olive oil. We're going to drizzle in the olive oil. We'll put some in to get it started and then drizzle it until it gets to the consistency that we want. This one's a little bit quicker and easier than the basil pesto. And I'm also not putting Parmesan cheese, and I'm also not putting garlic in here. Okay, so I ended up with 2 servings of onion top pesto. Remember, in this one we put no Parmesan cheese, no garlic. If I were to do this again, I would have chopped the onion tops a little bit smaller before I did it, but it worked out great. It pureed great, and boy, it is really good. So in all likelihood, I'm not going to use this on pasta. It's a little bit spicier than the basil. It probably would be great on chicken breasts, maybe even some fish, maybe on something like a cheese tortellini. Not sure, but we'll give it a try and we'll let you know. All right, so for a little bit of work tonight, interrupted by a little bit of chicken chores, we ended up with 2 servings of onion top pesto. Remember, your ingredients are onion tops that have been blanched and chopped. I would chop them a little bit finer than I did the next time that I do that. With some parsley, we used walnuts in this, and we used some olive oil and a little bit of salt. In our basil pesto, we used our basil. We did not blanch the basil. Even if you get it fresh, it can go right into the food processor. So the basil, olive oil, salt and pepper, a nice helping of garlic, and some Parmesan cheese. And don't forget, in the basil pesto, we used the pinoli nuts. So we ended up with 8 quarts of that. So I hope that you get a chance to make some of this with your bounty this year, and maybe even do a little bit of experimentation. And let me know if you come up with a great recipe that's different than mine. Again, I want to thank Kevin from Living Traditions Homestead for keeping me cool tonight. This stuff is absolutely amazing. I'll put a link to the video where he shows you how to make this. Now, what's coming up on Patriot Garden is we just harvested 56 pounds of potatoes. So the next thing is going to be canning potatoes, and I'll show you how to do that. So until then, happy gardening, everybody.